Drive west out of Bryson City on a 2-lane road that curves along the edge of Great Smoky Mountains National Park, and at some point the pavement tips north and the trees close in. The road is well maintained. It has a painted centerline, guardrails where the shoulder drops, and the quiet assurance of infrastructure that knows what it's doing. After 5.7 miles, it stops. Not at a viewpoint with a dramatic overlook. Not at a visitor center with a parking lot and a bronze plaque explaining the scenery. It stops at a mountain, more precisely at a 1,200-foot tunnel, bored through that mountain. The tunnel is unlit. Cars are not permitted inside it. Visitors who want to see what is on the other side have to get out and walk. On the other side, trails. Below the trails, Fontana Lake. Across the lake, a hillside, and on that hillside, family graves. The road is called Lakeview Drive. Locally, people have called it the Road to Nowhere for long enough that the name has become part of how the National Park Service describes it. NPS maintains the road, lists it as a scenic drive, and directs visitors to check current conditions before they go. What the official description doesn't explain, not in the opening sentence, is why the road ends where it does, or what it was supposed to become. This is not about the ghost stories. The tunnel attracts them, because an unlit mountain passage at the end of a road called the Road to Nowhere is the kind of place that collects them. But those stories are not what makes this road strange. What makes it strange is the document trail. The 1943 agreement, the construction that started and stopped, the settlement that came decades later and formally closed a claim without finishing a road, the gap between what the paperwork says was resolved and what the tunnel says remains. To understand why this road ends at a tunnel, you have to go back to before the lake existed. In the early 1940s, the Tennessee Valley Authority built Fontana Dam on the Little Tennessee River, in the southwestern corner of what is now Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The dam was a wartime project. Aluminum plants supplying the war effort needed power, enormous amounts of it, fast. And Fontana was part of TVA's answer. The dam went up on a compressed schedule, which meant that the communities living along the north shore of what would become the reservoir had to move with corresponding speed. The National Park Service dates the dam's completion to 1945. When the reservoir filled, it covered a significant stretch of North Carolina Highway 288, which had run along the North Shore. Communities had lived along that road for generations. Farms, churches, family land, the accumulated texture of lives built close to the river. When the water rose, NC 288 went under it. In 1943, while the dam was still under construction, the federal government made an arrangement to address the loss. The U.S. Department of the Interior, the Tennessee Valley Authority, the state of North Carolina, and Swain County signed an agreement tied to the transfer of North Shore land into the national park system. Inside that agreement was a provision. A road would be built along the north side of the new lake. The record is specific about the purpose. The road was intended to reconnect displaced residents with their cemeteries and other important community sites on the far side of the water. This was not a planning goal or a letter of intent. It was part of the formal legal arrangement by which the land changed hands. The obligation was in writing. The cemeteries mattered in a way that a policy list doesn't fully reach. North Shore families had been burying their dead in those hills for generations. Decoration Day, the annual visit to clean and tend the graves, was one of the fixed points around which community life organized itself. When the lake rose and the road went under, the graves didn't move. The hillside cemeteries remained on the North Shore, on the other side of water that hadn't been there a few years earlier. Getting to them required getting across Fontana Lake. Former NPS Superintendent Phil Francis, in an oral history recorded in October 2015, described what that meant in practice. The National Park Service organized annual boat and truck trips to bring families out to their grave sites, a coordinated effort to get people from one side of the lake to the other for cemetery visits. The North Shore Cemetery Association, representing descendants of North Shore families, advocated steadily for a road that would make the trip by car a possibility again, rather than a seasonal arrangement that depended on boats and park scheduling. The record also preserves the disagreement inside that community. Not everyone held the same view of what the 1943 obligation required, or what would satisfy it. Some pressed for the road itself. Others were eventually willing to consider a cash settlement instead. Francis's account records both positions. This account is not going to collapse that disagreement into a single voice, because the documentary record doesn't support one. What the record does support is that the water crossing, the boat, the organized trip, the logistics that substituted for the road, was not what families had been promised. It was what remained after the promised road wasn't built. Construction on the replacement road did eventually begin. In the 1960s, work started on what would become Lakeview Drive. Crews graded a roadbed and bored the tunnel through the mountain. The road advanced southward, working its way toward the lake and toward the connection the 1943 agreement had described. Then, in 1972, the work stopped. The National Park Service documents 3 reasons in the official record. Slope instability. The terrain on the north shore of Fontana Lake is not hospitable to road building, and the mountains in that stretch of western North Carolina don't give engineers easy passage. The slopes are steep, the rock unpredictable, the ground prone to movement. High costs. Building through that terrain had grown far more expensive than early projections. And significant environmental challenges. The early 1970s were precisely the years in which the National Environmental Policy Act was beginning to reshape what large infrastructure projects in sensitive landscapes would have to justify, document, and survive. These are the documented reasons. They are stated plainly in the official record, and there is no version of this story in which they don't count. The slope instability was real. The costs were real. The environmental concerns were real and legally consequential in ways they hadn't been when the 1943 agreement was signed. What the record doesn't do is settle the question of what those constraints meant for the obligation. The agreement said a road would be built. The 1972 halt said building that road was harder and more expensive than anticipated. Those are 2 different facts, and the gap between them is where the story lives for the next 3 decades. The road sat, the tunnel was finished, bored through the mountain, walkable on foot, but the motor road, the one that was supposed to replace what the dam had taken, was 5.7 miles long and going nowhere. Nowhere, in this case, being a pedestrian passage that opened onto trails heading toward a lake, toward the far shore, toward graves that families still had to reach by water. For roughly 30 years, the 1943 obligation sat in an unresolved state. The road wasn't built. The legal claim, Swain County's claim under the original agreement, had never been formally settled. The Cemetery Association continued to advocate. Swain County continued to seek either completion or compensation. And the unlit tunnel at the end of Lakeview Drive continued to mark the place where the project had stopped, without resolving whether the stop was permanent. In the mid-2000s, the National Park Service opened a formal environmental review under the National Environmental Policy Act. The NEPA process required the agency to examine alternatives and their consequences, not just to state a preference, but to document what the options actually were. 2 alternatives were seriously evaluated. The first was road completion. Build the remaining miles along the north shore. pushed the construction through the difficult terrain, finish what had been started in the 1960s and suspended in 1972. The second was monetary settlement. Pay Swain County an agreed sum to settle all claims arising from the 1943 obligation in lieu of further construction. The environmental impact study was completed. The record of decision came in 2008. The preferred alternative was a monetary settlement. In 2010, the U.S. Department of the Interior, Swain County, and the Tennessee Valley Authority signed a Memorandum of Agreement. The settlement amount up to $52 million to be paid to Swain County in installments in exchange for settling all claims under the 1943 arrangement. No further road construction. The obligation, in its legal form, would be discharged by payment rather than pavement. Look at what that means for the tunnel. The tunnel at the end of Lakeview Drive has always looked like a place where a project ran out of momentum, where the will or the money or the political attention simply faded until the work stopped and the unfinished edge became a fixture. That reading is incomplete. The road did stop in 1972 under real constraints, but the tunnel became permanent in 2010. Not by neglect or drift, by decision, by a signed legal agreement, preceded by a formal environmental review, in which the federal government and the county that held the claim agreed that the road would not be built, that cash would substitute for asphalt, and that the obligation written in 1943 would be discharged without the thing it had described. The end of the road is not where the project gave out. It is where a conversion was made. Miles owed converted to dollars paid. That conversion is in the record. It has a date and a signature and a specific dollar amount. The tunnel is the physical coordinate of a documented legal decision, and the 5.7 miles of road before it are the portion that got built before the decision was made. Some of the officials who participated in the settlement described it as genuine resolution, a fair accounting for a long-standing claim arrived at through a legitimate legal process. The NEPA record shows that road completion was not dismissed out of hand, but evaluated and found too costly and too damaging to the park to be the preferred path. The money was substantial. The legal framework was sound. There is a version of this story in which the settlement was the right outcome, given the constraints, and in which the 1943 obligation was honestly discharged by the terms both sides agreed to. That version is in the record. It deserves its hearing. What is also in the record is that a road and a check are different answers to the question of how a family gets from the south shore of Fontana Lake to a grave on the north side. One takes them there by car. The other compensates a county government for the fact that the car route won't be built, and leaves the families and their cemeteries to work out whatever arrangement remains. The U.S. Department of the Interior announced the closeout settlement payment on June 30th, 2018. $35.2 million, the final installment following earlier payments, completing the settlement terms the 2010 agreement had established. The 1943 obligation was legally discharged. The case was formally closed, a debt was paid. That is not the same as being kept. The distinction is not rhetorical. The settlement payment went to Swain County. The families who had pressed for the road, who had made the annual water crossing, who had organized and testified and waited, were not the same legal entity as the county that received the check. The legal claim was the county's. The human stake was carried by people for whom no check converts a boat trip to a grave into what the road was supposed to be. The National Park Service website, updated in September 2025, describes Lakeview Drive as a scenic drive ending at the tunnel, a place to go in the park, an attraction, a thing that visitors do. That description is accurate. It is also a record of what the road became, rather than what it was supposed to be. Lakeview Drive is still open. The National Park Service maintains it as an active road. In January 2026, an NPS bulletin listed it for potential weather-related closure during a winter storm. Not a memorial, not a historical marker, but a live road subject to the same seasonal management as any other park route. When conditions allow, visitors drive the 5.7 miles from near Bryson City to the tunnel, park, and walk through 1,200 feet of unlit mountain to reach the trails on the other side. Families still cross Fontana Lake to reach the North Shore cemeteries. The record available here doesn't establish the current frequency or logistics for each family and cemetery, and this account won't claim knowledge it doesn't have. What the record establishes is that the water crossing was not the intended answer. It was what remained after the intended answer. The road was converted into something the documents could close, but the landscape could not. The tunnel portal is the same tunnel portal it has always been. The same mouth of rock at the end of the same asphalt, the same unlit passage through the same mountain. But it reads differently against the documents. In 1972, it was the edge of a stalled project. The last point the work had reached before the constraints became definitive. In 2010, it became something more specific, the precise physical location at which a signed agreement had determined that no further road obligation existed. The mountain continues through the tunnel. The obligation, in its legal form, does not. A settlement was signed. A payment was announced. The road ends at the tunnel. The graves are on the other side of the lake,